Louis, quick question for you. When Greg comes up and says, hey, I want to do this mash bill, we're going to use a huge propensity of super expensive ingredients, and I think it's going to rock. What, nuts and bolts, accountant CEO style, what's going through your
You
brain?
don't have to ask that question, do you? Really?
I don't want to talk about how much whiskey I just got on my blazer.
Hey, thanks for joining us for your dose of Weekly Whiskey with John and Jay.
Weekly Whiskey is made on Mackie. If you'd like to find out more about the top-notch studio gear that we're using, you can check it out on Mackie.com.
Rock on. Yeah, thank you to Mackie. We love the way everything is sounding. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get on into it. What do we have in store today, John?
Absolutely, Jay. Let's go ahead and share this interview. We have something great here that we recorded with Greg Metze and Luis Gonzalez from Old Elk. And I think rather than try to give you a long preamble and tell you what's going to happen, I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. Let's do it.
Hell yeah. Greg, Luis, thank you so much for joining us. Go ahead, give us a little scoop about what you do. We'll start with you, Greg, but let us know, your background, what you do here at Old Elk, and then, kind of what a typical day in your role looks like.
Well, I'm actually in my 43rd year in the distilling business. So I started way back in 1978.
Wow.
And actually joined the Lawrenceburg, Indiana distillery under the Seagram umbrella and worked under them, with them for 24 years up till 2002 when they got out of the business entirely. And then from 2002 to 2012, we went through three other ownership changes. But under the Seagram umbrella, really, I got the best training in the world relative to becoming a master distiller. They were number one in the business for the entire 24 years that I worked under them, and had the most progressive research and development department in the industry. And through all that 40 or 50 years of research that they did, honing in on all the practices and processes and whatnot that creates world-class whiskey, was really all condensed into two textbooks and into the training program that I was lucky enough to be part of for that entire 24 years. So 2002, Seagram's gets out of the business altogether. And at that point, actually, the distillery started becoming a contract distiller. All the Seagram brands, as you probably know, were purchased by Pernod Ricard and Diageo, and they split up all the Seagram brands amongst themselves. Pernod Ricard wound up with ownership of the distillery as part of that transaction. So we started or continued to produce all the products for the Diageo brands that they acquired on a contract basis, and then naturally continued to produce all the products that were part of the Pernod brands. Fast forward to 2008, Pernod put the distillery up for sale as a result of another acquisition that they made, where they wound up with two distilleries and two bottling houses, really only had capacity for one of each. And at that point, we became LDI, Lawrenceburg Distillers, Indiana. And that's when we became 100% contract distillers under that leadership. Fortunately, we were able to maintain the contracts of Diageo and Pernod, so we continued to produce all the products for their brands, but there was a lot of plant capacity left that we decided we would aggressively pursue third-party contract sales, which we did. So over that 4.5-year period is when we really started making that distillery famous on the contract distilling basis. 2012, LDI had to give up ownership, and it became MGP from 2012 going forward. So really going back eight or 9 years now is really when I met Old Elk. They actually came to the distillery interested in getting into the whiskey business and wanted me to not only craft custom mash bills for them, but produce them as well. So Really, at that point, I was probably 35 years into my career, and literally that was my first opportunity to build custom mash bills from the ground up and then produce them as part of our contract distillation sales. So, that's really when I met Old Elk, and then as I got to know the company over the period of the next 3 or 4 years, it became apparent that this was a really special company, and they were on the ground floor of something really special. And in 2017, they asked me to join them full time as their master distiller, and it was literally a no-brainer. So, and the rest is history, and the rest is we're going to make some history.
That's great. So, I mean, you were effectively their master distiller prior to actually being the master distiller. Is that correct?
Yes. Again, I crafted 3 of the custom mash bills that we bring to market, and then the 95% rye mash bill that we bring to market is not a custom mash bill, but it's the mash bill that we made famous in Lawrenceburg.
Right.
So,
That's the one that everybody knows and loves.
The rye mash bill.
So yeah, I crafted the mash bills and I produced them, so I can, I have ownership really of all that product. I supervised it, I produced it, and I can absolutely speak for the quality of all the products that Old Elk brings to market. I like to call them world-class products, and maybe I think going forward, I think maybe I need to educate the consumers on what world-class means. But for me, in the training that I received under the Seagram umbrella, most of my organoleptic and century training relative to being part of my master distiller training was really about evaluating white distillates before they went into the barrel to make sure that they were worthy of going into the barrel. So when I talk about world class, to me that means there are no quality defects in the white distillate prior to going into the barrel. And my training was about being able to pick out many different kinds of quality defects that range from grain defects to fermentation defects to cooking and distillation. So again, when I call something world class, to me it means that there are no quality defects in that product, and the barrel will only make that distillate better as it goes into the maturity phase of its career.
That's pretty cool. I have to admit, one of my favorite things when I'm writing up Old Elk for Whiskey Raiders, which is, kind of my whiskey job, is getting to say, this product was produced at MGP by Greg Metze for Old Elk by Greg Metze. And I think it's, that doesn't really exist anywhere else in the industry. But before we get into your custom mash bills, I'm a little bit curious. We're joined by Luis here as well. What do you do with the Old Elk organization?
Yeah, Jay. So I serve Old Elk as their CEO. My day-to-day consists of a lot of different things, but primarily making sure that the business is making the right investments for the long-term runway and health of our business and organization, and making sure that we're doing the right things to connect with our consumers, as far as a much deeper connection. It goes beyond the bottle. For us, it's always been about being beyond the bottle, and that's how we started when we went to Greg Metze and really wanted him to take his expertise and take the handcuffs off, if you will, and produce something that everyone knows he's capable and we're capable of doing together. So, my day-to-day stays very focused as far as 70% of what I do, and then reserve 30% to make sure that we're with the people every day and making sure that the business is moving in the right directions, and more importantly, making sure that we're doing what we say we're going to do day in and day out.
I like that. So have you been involved since the beginning with this, Luis?
So I've actually been involved since 2017. We started this business really back in 2012 as far as the planning and strategy discussions around it. We come from a family called the Richardson family. They own Otterbox and several other businesses, Blue Ocean Enterprises. And, in 2012 and 2013, it was really the discussion about going from cases to bottles, right? Phone cases to bourbon bottles. And it was how do we do it right, and how do we do it how we feel is the right approach. And there's several different ways to start a spirits business. So involved in the early days, very little. And then around 2016 and 17, when the business was really getting ready to start putting its national plans together and strategy to launch across the country, and then eventually a global brand, was when I came over from Otterbox in the leadership positions that I was there to head this company and serve as their CEO here. Is coming over from 2017 from the technology business. Was very blessed to have an incredible culture of people around us and make the right hires around us that could help educate me on getting up to speed on the details of the spirits industry, and how we're going to go to market and how we're going to do that. So drinking through a fire hose, no pun intended, when I came over to the business, but people like Greg Metze and other great employees that we have around us really work together to fill those gaps and voids. And so it's been a great 3.5 years or so.
It's funny you mentioned your transition there from IT, the technology sphere, to the whiskey sphere, because John and I are both IT people by day and bourbon people by night. And while you were lucky enough to do, from IT by day to bourbon by day, we're kind of in the middle there. But Greg, I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned you've got, you guys are doing 95.5 rye, which, we kind of talked about is like the rye mash bill for Indiana, but you created specially crafted recipes for Old Elk. What goes into creating a new mash bill? What goes into kind of motivating how you see that process, and what did you want to accomplish with creating those for Old Elk?
Well, the very first mash bill that Old Elk tasked me with was flagship Old Elk bourbon. And at the time, the discussion was that they wanted a bourbon whiskey that was smooth and easy. And really, that was the only two words that they gave me to work with. And that was really the end of the meeting. So, again, I'm 35 years into my career, and this is my very first opportunity to craft and build and produce mash bills unrestricted. And really, from that point on, I just leveraged my experience. I knew to get smooth and easy characteristics that I had to get the malted barley content way up in that bourbon mash bill. In the back of my mind, I also knew that all the other mash bills that I produced in my career always had some degree of rye in it for a really nice spice characteristic. And I really wanted that to be part of the profile. So to get that rye character to pass through into the distillate, it takes a minimum of 15% rye in the mash bill. So at that point, it just became reverse math. I took the corn content down to the minimum, 51%, factored in that 15% rye to get that little spice characteristic, and that left me room for 34% malted barley, probably 5 and 6 times higher than any other bourbon on the shelf. And really, that was really the defining moment for me relative to my thoughts about Old Elk Company. And what I have come to find ever since is the DNA of Old Elk is, one, to bring world-class quality products to the market, but then they also want to be different than everybody else on the shelf. And when we started crafting the 3 custom mash bills, that was really at the heart of the experience and where it was all born. So we started with the Old Elk bourbon mash bill, very high malted barley content. And again, when I said unrestricted earlier, I didn't have any spending limits, so to speak, on mash bills, which was the first in my career. The first 35 years of my career was very much in a commercial setting. Every year we did budgets, and every year the company would come back and say, we want you to continue producing these world-class whiskeys, but we want you to do it cheaper this year. And the low-hanging fruit when you need to do things cheaper is usually cut the malted barley content in the mash bill. Just to give you a reference, if we've got a quick minute, corn is by far the most available cereal grain. It also has the highest starch content of all cereal grains, which is the part that you can convert into alcohol. And because it's the most abundant, it's the cheapest. So it ranges probably in the neighborhood of $4 or $5 a bushel. Then we step up to rye. That's probably in the neighborhood of probably $8 to $10 a bushel. So it's double. And you have another factor is that the starch content is lower than corn. It runs maybe 60% rather than 72%. So you're going to get less yield out of rye than you will corn. So it's a double. That's a double whammy. You're paying double and you're getting less. So if we step it up to malted barley, now you're probably talking $25 a bushel. And again, the starch content for malted barley is in that 62% range. So you're going to get less yield, and you're paying, considerably more. So, long story short is that I was not restricted by the cost of the mash bill. They're very expensive mash bills, and actually we don't really pass that cost along. We do it because we want to bring really special products to market that are different than everybody else.
That's great.
So after I produced 8,000 or 9,000 barrels of the Old Elk bourbon for them, we got back together again and started talking about, well, what do you think will be the next up and coming whiskey 6 or 7 years down the road? Which is really where we're at today. This is 6, 7 years, 8 years down the road from when we started the conversations. And at that time, rye whiskey, 7, 8 years ago, rye whiskey was taking off like crazy, gaining traction, and was really the next new, whiskey going forward. But wheated bourbon and wheat whiskeys were really largely untapped 8 years ago. I mean, there was obviously some very nice products on the market, but not a whole lot of them. So as we talked, I told him I thought that wheated bourbon and wheat whiskey could be the next new up and coming whiskeys today. And in doing so, then we decided again with Old Elk's DNA that we were going to go large. We were going to go to the extreme on the wheat content in both those categories, which is what we did. So the wheated bourbon mash bill became 51% corn, the minimum, and then we put 45% wheat into that mash bill and 4% malt. So again, on the wheat spectrum, that was probably double what most of the wheated bourbons were on the market even today. And then the wheat whiskey, again, we took that same mentality. So we went 95% wheat and 5% malt. We went large, and those products hit the market early spring this year, and they're both gaining traction at a really nice pace, and the whiskeys are really exceptional whiskeys. So.
Totally. You actually jumped right into something I was going to ask you. As you were going through the mash bills and talked about the grains, I was thinking in my mind, this is a great segue into hearing more about the wheat and the wheat whiskey and how that kind of incorporates. But I don't even have to lob you a softball on that one because you already had the damn thing ready for me. So you knocked it out of the park without me even having to ask you. That's great.
Well, the really interesting thing that I found out through that whole experience was that the white distillates, when we produced them, were free of quality defects and looked really nice, and I knew that they would mature nicely, but I had really no experience in the wheat bourbon or wheat whiskey categories through my career at the Lawrenceburg distillery. I knew the distillate going in was really good, and I knew that the barrel would make it better, but the part I didn't know was that because of the mash bills either being low corn content or no corn content, it actually, when I started looking at them at 5 and 6 years old, you would see congeners that would normally have been masked by high corn content mash bill. So it was really fun to see some new things come to the front that I really hadn't really expected that. So it was very much a learning experience for me as
Yeah,
well.
you get to use a couple different tools out of the toolbox. It might not be from your usual stuff, which sort of reminds me, actually, earlier you were mentioning how Seagram's had a really sort of innovative approach, a lot of R&D, and you mentioned that you had actual textbooks. Is that true?
Yes. Yeah, we refer to them as the Blue Bibles.
Can we talk about those a little bit? It sounds really interesting. No, wait, do you still have it right there?
This is a matter of fact.
I've been buying the wrong textbooks when I was in college.
Seriously.
These are, they were never published. They're company textbooks, but I don't know if you can see it. But this one is beverage alcohol production. So this is all about cooking, yeast, fermentation.
Wow.
And then the next one is beverage alcohol distillation. So this is all the many, many different ways of distillation practices.
That's awesome. I feel like those should have a big old
congener
classified
productions
stamp
and
on
all
them.
that.
I feel like we're getting read in on a CIA project here.
So these two books are like the culmination of 40 or 50 years of that research and development. And what they did in these two books is they pinned down all the methods and the yeast and the cooking methods, fermenting methods, distillation methods, all the methods that produce world-class whiskeys based on their findings. And, we still follow these practices today.
That is, I mean, that's crazy to me. I kind of figured you meant like, oh, we've got some memos, maybe some run books, some guidelines, but to have a hardbound book with a nice printed front is definitely more official than just memos. And one thing that strikes me here is that you mentioned, you had been there for 35 years at this point, but when you came on and did the, majority wheat and the wheat whiskey, that was a new experience for you. That kind of blows my mind that there was that much, that's some pretty significant experimentation left to be done after how long you'd been. So what's the biggest thing you learned when you pivoted to doing, a 95 wheat whiskey or your wheated bourbon after all that time with the textbooks?
Well, frankly, all the experience that we gained with the 95% rye whiskey mash bill at Lawrenceburg Distillery, I don't know if you're aware of it, but rye is a very difficult mash to cook and ferment. It's like really viscous. It has an enormous propensity to foam. Mm-hmm. And anytime you have foaming in your fermenter, it breaks the CO2 cap on the top that you count on to keep oxygen out. Once you have foaming, you actually start drawing oxygen into your fermenter that creates negative quality characteristics. So over a period of over the period of my 24 years training, we were constantly improving the process and the methods on how to produce that 95% rye mash bill so that the quality day in, day out would be, very, very steady. And as it turns out, wheat has very similar characteristics relative to being difficult to cook and ferment. And as luck would have it, or as experience would have it, everything we learned about how to produce that 95% rye mash bill actually translated to the 95% wheat whiskey mash bill. And that was one of the very big contributing factors that made me comfortable in jacking up the wheat content in that wheat whiskey all the way up to 95%.
It's cool to hear about these really technical details that we don't often hear about people talking about, like talking about the actual, the CO2 cap and all that stuff. Now, Louis, quick question for you. When Greg comes up and says, hey, I want to do this mash bill, we're going to use a huge propensity of super expensive ingredients, and I think it's going to rock. What, nuts and bolts, accountant, CEO style, what's going through your brain?
You don't have to ask that question, do you, really?
I'm just curious. We never get to talk, obviously we know the answer already, right? Like you're unconstrained on the budget, which I think is funny, but I'm curious on Louis's insight here.
Well, we laugh because we talk about this a lot. And so, first, I think before I answer that, I think it's important to understand kind of where we come from in the sense of what we're trying to deliver and what we're trying to stay true to. And that is, as Greg mentioned, world-class quality products that don't have the defects that maybe you might see somewhere else. And to do that, you have to make a commitment to the industry. And that's what we did. Our commitment to the industry was to come in and be a little different, whether that meant through our philosophy and methodology on how we go to market, on how we scale the business, or really how that was around our creation of our product. And little did we know when we said to Greg Metze that, no handcuffs, go make us something smooth and easy. It meant the minimum amount of the cheapest ingredient and the maximum amount of the most expensive ingredient. And that continued throughout the creation of all of our other mash bills. But, I think you have certain people in this industry that have just earned the opportunity to bring forward their expertise in something that they kind of in their gut know that is going to be a good product. I wish I could tell you that, he has found ways to make things cheaper, but we've gone the wrong direction. We've made things more expensive. But at the end of the day, it's what our commitment is to the industry and our consumers who trust us to put a quality product in front of them. And with Greg leading our product and our creation there, that's what you get. You get an expensive mash bill with a great product that doesn't necessarily translate on shelf to the consumer. So we will have products that do translate in those higher premium dollars, and there's value there that's above and beyond what's currently out on the market. But I think it's something that we wanted to stay true to and have continued to stay true to by putting the best products that we can out.
Killer. I like that. Good answer.
Yeah, I just wanted to add real quick while we're doing that is, our ownership and our leadership, being able to give me the latitude of doing mash bills like that, and then being able to mature them for the length of time that they need to be matured before we bring them to market is a really big deal. A lot of folks in our industry really haven't had that latitude necessarily, and the worst thing you can do is launch a brand that's too young or too cheap to bring to market, and it just ruins it from the get-go. And I am very thankful that I've always had the latitude of being able to do it right and bring truly world-class products to market for our consumers. And our leadership and ownership has given me that latitude. It's a remarkable thing in this industry.
It is, for sure. I mean, one thing to look at, too, is just the way that so many brands in this space launch. I mean, think how many bourbon brands or spirits brands in general get off the ground by sourcing a product from MGP and then using that as a backbone until either their distillation is online, aged, and ready, or if they can't get their own stuff sorted, they'll, whether it's through a combination of blending MGP into their distillate or just continuing to make a brand extension with that same liquid that they're getting from Indiana. It's really interesting to look at how so many brands can launch that way. And, I mean, in effect, you sort of did, but you guys had the wherewithal to scoop up Greg and say, like, instead of making this stuff over there, why don't you just come over here in-house? And so it's like, it is, I really feel like the other side of the same coin where instead of just saying, we're going to use this MGP liquid until we're ready, you kind of had the mastermind behind this whole project, building your product from scratch from day one, right?
Yeah. Right. But I think that there's different ways to approach it, right? And there's not one right way or one wrong way. A lot of people have been incredibly successful sourcing aged liquid and going out and trying to create a brand. I think it just really, for us, it was a combination of both, right? It was, we want to purchase from MGP, but we want Greg to make it, and we want to do our own mash bill. So really, it's more like leveraging the equipment and the assets and the scalability to be prepared for what we wanted to do. Because I think what a lot of people don't know is where we started making our bourbon in 2013, 2012, 2013, all through 2015, really. We racked up over 17,000 barrels of bourbon, and we waited 5 years to launch the business. We went back to work on our other businesses and other things as we, gave it time to mature and come to age, and then, getting Greg to be able to put, his hands on it and tell us when it's ready to go. We didn't want to rush that. And so I think, with the scale of our business, there's always an opportunity and a strategy to use both contract manufacturing and in-house manufacturing. And sometimes brands that scale on a really fast pace need to leverage both. And there's great partners out there that are able to do that. I think for us, it was just one of really the first brands that went out and said, we don't want to buy 2 or 4 or 6 year and launch right now. We want to make everything. We want to make our own custom mash bills. We want to take 1 or 2 of Greg's favorite mash bills that he's made in the past. Let's make the investments and the commitment to the industry and the consumers in which are going to have our product, and let's be patient. And when the time is right, we're going to launch this business, and that's what we did. And, over the course of 19 to 20 months, we became a brand in all 50 states. We've had some incredible growth, and that's due to incredible people within the business, along with our incredible distribution partners and consumers that are giving us the opportunity to try our product the first time, and then seeing the story and the quality behind it and coming back to us a second time. And that's all you can ask for in this business is an opportunity to have that platform to be tried by the consumer. And so, pretty unique and stressful first 5 or 6 years as the angel share is happening. All while we're ready to launch this business, I'm talking to Greg, and Greg is saying, hey, we lose 12% in the first year, maybe, and then anywhere from 2 to 3% a year after that. And I'm calculating in my head, we've been sitting on these barrels for 5 or 6 years. It's time to go.
Right.
We need to launch this business. But we really did a good job of working together. Again, our ownership just being as patient as they are and as committed to excellence as they are, along with myself and Greg. Our commitment to excellence and our discipline is, I think, second to none. But that doesn't come with a rigid approach, right? And that discipline is one thing, rigid is another. And so, I like to say that we're incredibly disciplined but never rigid in how it is that we approach things and bring products to consumers.
Sure. I like it. I think you guys have a cool approach to it. And, overall, I had no idea that the brand existed so many pages back in the history book. I didn't understand that you guys are sitting on nearly 20,000 barrels of whiskey for that many years. But it does sort of start to unfold a little bit of something in my mind when you mentioned earlier that you were going to, potentially be getting into something a little bit more premium and maybe have some of the higher price point products out there, and that you started some of your distillation and stuff in 2012 or 13. Are we talking like a 10-year age-stated project? Are we talking, what's some of the stuff that you might have alluded to here? Give us a little bit of a tease.
So I think one thing that you can always count on for Old Elk is we're never going to be short-sighted and looking only, 1 or 2 years out. We're always talking about the future. We're always investing in the future, whether it be future people in our company or future products in our company or future systems, to allow us to really drive and manage the business more effectively. So in a roundabout answer, I think that, you can expect some future ages coming out right around the corner. You can do some math on when we started laying some bourbon down and what next year is going to bring. But, I think we've been very conscious about not just coming out with 1 or 2 products and being very patient and not chasing the dollars, right? For us, it's build a plan, work the plan, and the rest will come. If you chase the dollars and you chase the success, bad behavior starts to happen. And so for us, it was, what do we want to offer? What are the ages we want to offer? And then what's the innovation and the blending of some of the older years, like the Infinity blend that's come out that does leverage some older Kentucky that was a bourbon that was sourced along with some of our 6 and 7 year bourbon. But I think you're going to continue to see higher ages come out for Old Elk in a balanced approach, right? We also don't want to be the company that comes out and says, here's 10-year, everybody eat it up. And then, by the way, you've got to wait another 4 years to see that bottle again. We don't want to be that company. So when people are excited, we want them to have us be that household name that they can count on to be on shelf and be the quality that they expect to be there. So, and a very long-winded answer, John, yes, you will see some higher aged products come out. You'll see some, higher aged blends based on Greg's palate and what he's always wanted to do. come out, and that may or may consist of all Old Elk product, or it may consist of 60 or 70% Old Elk and blended with some other products of his favorite that are out there. But very long-winded answer, yes.
That's exciting
I like
stuff.
it.
I like to hear it.
I'm especially, one thing I keep noticing is you guys seem to have a real commitment to patience, right? You mentioned time and time again that you could have chased dollars, you're choosing not to, especially with enabling Greg to work with whatever mash bill he wants. And I'm curious, I've got a final question for Greg before we wrap on up, but I know you guys have a finished series coming up, and finishing casks are not something that was really big over at MGP, right? Because that's the bulk distillate. Are you working directly with the finishing casks, and what have you learned about kind of the wood management that comes with that new flavor of whiskey and that kind of new perspective on releasing American whiskey?
Well, that's been a really fun project. It started about a year ago, actually. So it's hitting the shelf now. We've got 4 different finishes, cask finishes, and that's the only way that you can get a cask strength product currently, Old Elk product. But so we've got a sherry cask finish. We've got a tawny port cask finish. We have an Armagnac cask finish, and we have a cognac cask finish. Those are making their way to market really as we speak. All very, 4 very unique, different finishes. And again, that was not a big part of my training or expertise at MGP, but again, once again, Old Elk stepped up and gave us the latitude to try new things. And so we started this program really about a year ago today. We did our first harvest, I think back in March or April. That's the product that is hitting the shelf as we speak. And then we have refilled those barrels for the second round, and those are actually being looked at pretty much as we speak to see if they've reached the maturity and the levels of finish that we're looking for. So again, that's been a really fun project. The results have been really, really good, fabulous actually. And then we talk about the ability to do different things. I mean, we touched on it just briefly. The Infinity blend that is hitting the market again as we speak is just a beautiful blend of 6-year-old Old Elk bourbon, and it's got 2 vintage Kentucky whiskeys in it as well, some 11-year-old and 12-year-old.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's kind of a mix of heritage based on my 43 years in the industry, and it's got some legacy relative to vintage and legacy Kentucky bourbon. So again, a really great project. The blend is fabulous, and the package is beyond fabulous. So if you get a chance, check that one out.
Will do.
An amazing. It's going to be a big hit.
Cool.
And then again for next year, we're already working on things for 2022. I can't speak to them. Maybe Luis can, but anyway, I'm definitely working on additional things for 2022 already.
Yeah, we've got next year we're going to release several new casks that will come out. We'll leave those for a surprise.
Okay.
Then we've got some higher age single barrel programs coming out next year. To your question, John, I think we're going to see a lot of older single barrels be released into the market next year on an allocated approach to make sure that we can continue to release those older ages year over year. But really excited to bring forward some new products next year that both touch on quality and touch on what consumers are excited about. I always tell our team that, we didn't go to medical school, which means we're not in the prescription business. We are in the listening and providing solution business. And one of the things that our consumers have really talked about a lot is the affinity for our wheat products. So you might see a spin on some wheat products come out next year that are going to be well received, I think, and just the continuation effort around, providing consumers what they're looking for.
Excellent. So I got one last thing for you guys, and this is the easy one. we'll end on a nice, easy note here. And when I say easy, I'm obviously lying, right? I'm going to now ask you, here we are recording this on a weekday night. What out of the Old Elk portfolio are you reaching for on a night like this? What? And I'm not wording this as what's your favorite, but you know that's what I want to hear. So, what is the one that you're reaching for on the casual night when you go to your Old Elk cabinet at the house?
Well, I've got all four categories right here in front of me because I didn't know if we were going to taste
That's a
them
good
or not,
answer.
but, I've got the 45% wheat bourbon that I've been sipping on tonight. So it's about 55. It's a little clammy. First week of fall here in Cincinnati, and it just hits the spot for tonight.
That's fair. Luis, what about you?
For me, I've got to stay true. Well, all of our products, obviously, I enjoy. But our high malt, our flagship bourbon, I don't know if it's because it's, got the highest amount of malt in that product than any other, and I just feel like I have to drink it, or it really is. I mean, that 88 proof that Greg selected on that product just works really well. It's a great everyday sipper. My next one would be a wheat bourbon that I would go to. And then here, as soon as I know that all of our consumers and customers are taken care of with Infinity, I'll start dipping into some Infinity blend.
Okay.
But we'll make sure that all of our customers get what they need before we do.
Very responsible answers, guys. Very good job.
Yeah,
Cool. Well,
it's the truth.
I mean, I love it. You guys have both tact and passion, which is a great combination in the whiskey industry, where there are many, many, many distillers. And I have to say, we picked and selected 3 single barrels from you guys a couple months ago. They landed 3 weeks ago, and they sold out instantly, and I've heard nothing but praise. So put that feather in your cap that the world's orniest whiskey community is a fan of Old Elk, and we'll be back for more. But it's been great to have you guys tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Greg. It's been great to hear about your experience, which eclipses most others in the industry, and I've loved the brutally honest business side chatter from you as well, Luis. So thank you guys for your time tonight. It's been awesome.
Thanks for catching your dose of Weekly Whiskey here with John and Jay.
Yeah, if you'd like to go ahead and become part of our community, you can support what we're doing. You can gain access to exclusive content and inside information in the world of whiskey. You can do all of this by joining us at patreon.com/thewhiskeynet.
Also, don't forget to check out our studio sponsor, Mackie. You can find them on Instagram at Mackie Gear or on their website, mackie.com.
Yeah, Mackie is making us sound great, and they have everything your studio might need. If you're looking for more from John, he is over at thebourbonfinder.com. If you're looking at more from me, I'm Jay over at whiskeyraiders.com, the Rotten Tomatoes of whiskey. So thanks for joining us, and cheers, y'all.
Cheers, everybody.